Good afternoon. Michael Baker, Tulsa Fire Department. We just want to take a moment to remind not only the citizens of Tulsa and Northeast Oklahoma about Crash Responder Safety Week. We find ourselves in a situation where firefighters, police officers, emergency medical technicians, record drivers and operators, along with anyone that works in the highway system, is placing themselves at risk every day in traffic accidents that occur from inattentive driving, the use of intoxicants while driving, or not preparing or keeping alert to the presence of an emergency on their scene. Tulsa Fire Department is actively working through systems of education. Traffic incident management is a course that is taught to all fire personnel. Additionally, we are utilizing other systems and exploring new technology, such as traffic warning devices that will integrate into Waze and other traffic alerting systems in vehicles. This is a situation in which firefighters are at risk on vehicle fires, traffic accidents, and other incidents they're operating on the highway. As we approach the winter season, when we have icy roads, snow conditions, or wet roads, we find ourselves especially vulnerable as traffic conditions change. It's getting darker earlier, and the sun is rising a little bit later soon, and so we are finding ourselves commuting in the dark a lot more. So please be aware of responders as you commute now that we've had time change and that weather that is wet or freezing is approaching. During the polar vortex earlier this year, we found ourselves in one day damaging 6 to 8 fire apparatus due to crashes. So those crashes not only pose a risk to the firefighters operating in the incident, but that is $1 million fire apparatus on Tulsa streets that is damaged and out of service. And frankly, with tight municipal budgets, we can't just buy fire apparatus to replace that. So it's very important that everyone does their part this week and you're aware of responder safety on the highway. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Paul Madden, Traffic Safety Coordinator for the Tulsa Police Department. Not going to expand too much on what Chief Baker's already covered. First and foremost, it may not be known, but for first responders, one of the most dangerous things we can do and one of the most dangerous areas we can operate in is the roadway, just as simple as that. Every time we make a car stop, every time we get out of our vehicle, the likelihood of injury and or death increases dramatically. I ask personally that each person on the roadway and on our city streets ask yourself, what am I doing? Am I moving to the right lane, to the proper lane when I see emergency vehicles or emergency lights? If you're not doing that, start. As soon as you see the lights, find out what lane you're in, figure out what lane you're in, move over. We need you to move over and slow down for us. Inattentive driving is rampant in our society now. It's become pretty much accepted, but it is against the law. Please put your phones down, pay attention inside your vehicle. Be an example for other drivers while you're driving. Give us all a little bit of a break. Even if you can't give me a full lane, give me a foot. I had a driver give me about 1.5 feet today, and that felt like a blessing compared to 1.5 feet the other direction, we'll say. So be the example for other drivers. Start moving over. Drivers behind the first vehicle, you should be moving over too. Do what you can for us. We're all trying to get home to our families and our loved ones. We look forward to having better interactions, but do that for us, and we'll all get home safely. Thank you.
Good afternoon. As we enter into the holiday seasons, I would remind people that traffic collisions, traffic tends to increase substantially, and with that, collisions. And I would ask you, as you're driving and you see a wreck, and oftentimes what people don't understand is that our officers, our deputies, are oftentimes performing life-saving measures at that point in time, whether it's extracting somebody who's been pinned in a vehicle or performing CPR on the roadside. And so you would have to ask yourself, if that was your family member, would you want our first responders paying 100% of their attention to saving that person's life instead of having to worry about getting run over by inattentive drivers or people who are violating the rules of the road? As a second reminder, move over or slow down is law. As of last year, I would remind people that when you see first responders on the road, to please slow down or move over to the opposite lane so that you can, again, give those first responders plenty of room in which to perform their duties. As far as in the rural areas, there's a tendency, because it's not as congested, for people to speed. And what we are seeing is, more often than not, is an increase in traffic fatalities. And so I would also ask you that if you're not in the city, the rules of the road still apply. Please watch for our deputies, our troopers, and again, our first responders who are out there performing their duties day in, day out, so that they can go home as well and enjoy the holidays. Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm Joshua Yoakum, a paramedic with EMSA. So a quick statistic I want to throw out there is that over the past year, especially in the Eastern Division, specifically in the Eastern Division of EMSA, we have run 6,500 car accidents. Just want to say that that's 6,500 at least family members, friends, neighbors in our community who have been in actual duress, have been in actual emergency situations. And that is at least, 6,500 instances in which first responders could have been severely injured while performing their duty. We know that cars so often do not slow down when they see us. So often there are people who are driving distracted. They are looking at their phones. They are eating. They are not even caring to slow down. And from the perspective of a paramedic, that is very stressful. That's very frustrating, because in these emergency situations, the last thing that I'm thinking about, the last thing that paramedics or EMTs are thinking about, is whether or not our lives are in danger. Because we're looking at these patients, we're thinking about massive hemorrhage, airway, ventilatory support, controlling their body temperature, thinking about which hospital they need to go to, all while these cars are speeding by us. The last thing we need to worry about is whether or not we're going to get hit by a speeding driver. Okay, so if I could just say anything to my neighbors, to the people in this community, I just encourage you, okay, get off your phones. When you see emergency vehicles, emergency lights ahead of you, slow down, move to the opposite side of the road, and just be mindful of where you're going. Thank you.
If you have any questions for the individual people, just specifically call them out, and then afterwards, if you want to grab them individually.
Would anybody, is there anything an extra step outside of things you listed, like when you're in an emergency situation, like with a driver, like let's say I'm the person who's on the highway and I see you over there, would you prefer like a driver maybe throw on their emergency lights, maybe to alert the people behind them, and maybe slow down if they can't see, see the accident or incident on the shoulder or wherever it might be? Is that something that you maybe recommend, or is that something that it may be counterproductive to help me out?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anything helps as long as you are slowing down and moving to the opposite end of the road. Yes, that helps. If you want to throw on your hazards, because, I mean, scientifically, those blinking lights, you're more likely to get someone's attention by those blinking lights, or even just pressing your brake a couple of times so that your brake lights go on a couple of times to get people's attention behind you, that there's something in front of them that is you're going to need to slow down for. So, yes.
Any more questions?
What's the one thing people can do that will make the most difference and cut down crashes the most?
I think I'm Deputy Chief Eric Daglish. I think they've hit it. It's if the lane is clear to your left, if we're assuming a car stop on the right-hand side of the road, and you can get into the left lane, that is by far creates a full lane of buffer for us, and that is by far the most important. We were discussing before the press conference that oftentimes being the example, if you are the first car through a break of cars and they see you suddenly move over, or they see your brake lights come on and start to move over, it's a natural reaction to follow those cars to the left-hand side. So if you're the person that can be the example and move to the left, you're going to provide that buffer for a very long distance behind you, versus you're the car that does not pull over and they follow you in that same lane. That's the result we're going to get. So being the example and moving over is the one thing they can do to make a difference. Kelsey, did you have a question? two Tulsa Police officers on a traffic stop very recently on Garnett Road, and while conducting that traffic stop, a third vehicle came up from behind and crashed into them, flipped that car over, and pushed the marked unit into the two officers and the citizen they were interviewing at the time. And luckily, no life-threatening injuries. Some officer that'll be off work for a little while. One went back to work, but we thought it illustrated the need for the attentiveness and the danger that the officers face by just being parked in the roadway out of necessity.
Say I don't follow the law, I don't pull over, I don't move over, but I don't hit anyone, I don't take out. Is that a citation issue? Is that
If there were the capacity, sometimes on our car stops, we have multiple officers there helping with traffic control. If that violation is observed, it can absolutely result in a citation from the officers that are providing that buffer. That's what they're there for. And so, depending on their ability to get out into traffic, it can result in a citation. Absolutely. For our department, I would say if you don't pull over and you run into our officers, you will face the appropriate charges.
Speaking of charges, are just laws in general. Anyone can speak. If you guys would like stronger laws as far as like distracted drivers, specifically with phones, like that's in Atlanta, they have a law now that you have to have that dashboard to put your phone on for any kind of GPS or anything like that, so that if you're caught with it in your hand, it's like a very, very severe penalty. I'm not sure the difference between phones and that, but it's just something I don't think from Atlanta. So is that something that you guys would prefer, or is that something that can happen? Or?
You know, personally, I think we have the tools on the books right now, legislative wise. It's getting folks to comply with those without having to enforce our way to compliance. I think education is a big part of it. I think some folks are not pulling over because they see us off to the side of the roadway, and in their mind, we're out of the way. They don't understand the inherent dangers, what might be behind them. So I think that's what we're here today for, is the education piece. I think that's the priority.
Have any of you actually been in a situation where you've been in a traffic stop or responding to an emergency and you see the sign of yellow notice?
It happened to me this morning. Yep. So it happened to me this morning. I made a car stop on 169 southbound and turned on every emergency light that I had, and drivers were either not taking the time to try and get over, or they simply didn't know how to get over. I don't know what they were thinking, but before I got out of my vehicle, I had to wait for 8 cars to pass, and I'll say half of those could have gotten over to the middle lane, but they chose not to. It happens almost every car stop that we make.